Didn't play enough CJ Stroud yesterday. Have no fear. Neither did I. But good news is we get to dust ourselves off because there's a Monday Night Football showdown slate tonight. Chargers and the Jets, $500K to first place. So we got to dust ourselves off and get right to it. And of course, as is always the case here on Mondays and Thursdays on Splash Play, I'm going to build lineups 3 different ways. First, I'm going to hand build a lineup using the advanced analytics that I so love from sites like Sports Info Solutions, Pro Football Reference, and many others. Second, we're going to optimize some lineups. Let's use projections from Stochastic to find what the math is going to put people on as the best plays of the day. And of course, number 3, we're going to simulate some lineups on Stochastic as well to find out what the Sims think are the best plays tonight. I have my guess as to the guy who's going to make it into every single lineup, but we will find out in a moment here. And of course, at the end of the video, I will give you guys 3 takeaways as to what you can do tonight to build some unique lineups. Let's waste no time. Let's get into it. Shout out to the chat as always. Everybody here lining up bright and early. What's up, Spags? Got washed yesterday. Let's chase. Our guy Justin here. Jonathan had the good side of CJ Stroud 4xing yesterday. Hit the like button. Yes, please do all of that. And of course, go back in time, play some more CJ Stroud. My bad luck yesterday, my run bad was I did get some Stroud, got some Tank Dell, got some Dalton Schultz in my lineups. You know where I put them all? In the mini max. You know where I didn't get a single CJ Stroud lineup? In the Millie Maker, in the play action, in the first down. Anywhere where there was actual money to be won, did not get anything going there. So got killed. Thank God for the DraftKings lost back offer that they provided yesterday. But it's showdown. Showdowns are fun. Showdowns are a new opportunity. It is a new day. I slept in late. I'm ready to go today and get it going. And let's talk about the guy who I think will be in every lineup tonight. That is Breece Hall. Why is Breece Hall going to make it in every lineup? 2 things. And you look at the stat line, and I got to tell you, I got a lot of comments last week from people who kind of stumbled upon the Spags rankings video and were like, why is Breece Hall not in the top 10? Why are you not ranking Breece? Why are you like, people are so obsessed with sucking Breece Hall's dick. And I know this is not the intro you're going to get in a lot of showdown videos, but it is something for me as somebody that I think Breece Hall is very talented. I think Breece Hall is very good. The metrics I look at, he's perfectly fine. 0 flat EPA, negative 0.02 EPA per rush. These are fine numbers overall for a guy like Breece Hall. But you guys, the person watching this, you love Breece Hall so much. And again, I know this because I see time and time again throughout the summer, I had Pat Corrane, of course, the BBM 3 winner last year, came onto our stream with me and Pete just to talk about how I wasn't high enough on Breece Hall. Ultimately ended up being right on that one. So take that in your millions of dollars, Pat Corrane. I was right about Breece Hall's ADP. Point being, though, he just keeps getting there in fluky ways. You cannot have 12 rushes for 17 yards and think that this guy is a great play. Yes, he broke a 50-yard touchdown, but even besides that, he had 9 targets basically for 20 yards. Like, that is not a lot of production for Breece Hall. That said, Breece Hall's the only weapon on the Jets that's good. So I see why people love Breece Hall, but I do need to give you guys a reality check here that these are not like impressive numbers. I get that breaking 50-yard touchdowns is a lot of fun. This show is called Splash Play. I've named the podcast after big plays. I love big plays. That said, big plays are fluky. Big plays are very hard to land on. Big plays when you're not a good team can sometimes be difficult. And people are going to play Breece Hall like every single game he's going to break a 50-yard touchdown. That is not how football works. So I'm going to say that right now. I don't care if you're calling it a heel turn. I just have to be real with you guys here that this is insane how much everybody loves Breece Hall. That said, he's a very talented player. You're playing the Chargers on the year. The Chargers a negative 0.07 EPA per rush, which is basically middle pack in terms of what we're seeing out there of teams and what they're giving up per run play. They are worse against the pass, 0.06 EPA per dropback, 0.07 EPA per pass. Egregiously bad against QB runs, 1.2 EPA per rush allowed on QB runs. So there are spots that you can go to that are not this guy, Breece Hall, who is putting up 12 for 17, 12 for 39. Yes, 22 for 177 against a shitty Denver defense. Fantastic. 6 for 56, 12 for 18, 4 for 9. I get it. He got his touch limit lifted. I don't care how angry I am at Breece Hall right now. I just have to, this has been bubbling up after hearing people run the laps over and over again. And play Breece Hall tonight, but I got to warn you guys, he's going to be everywhere, and you can probably play other parts of the Jets offense and hope he can get there. And that's what I'm going to say. That said, in this hand build, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play Breece Hall. I'm not going to play him at captain, actually. I don't think that's the right play. But I do think that Breece Hall, still a fine play. I do think he's got a floor and obviously does have a ceiling here. But I do need you guys to have a wake-up call that if you are cramming in Breece Hall in every single lineup, you need to come to grips with the fact that on a showdown slate especially, you are going to be playing right into the hands of the entire field. And the way you win money is going to be last night. Jamar Chase looked like a great play. Jamar Chase has gone off in multiple games, all of that. You know what happened? Jamar Chase, despite all the usage, did make a winning lineup. This is what happens every single showdown slate. And I need you guys to be aware of your personal biases coming in, much like I need to be aware of mine, that Breece Hall is going to be owned by everybody. And if you love him, this is the day to love him a little bit less, is all I would say. All that said, to put him in the lineup is crazy. Yeah, I think he's a good play. I think he's still a perfectly fine play. It's really the matchup more than anything. That said, it's like if he doesn't go well, for a single entry, I'm putting him in here. I can tell you when I play, I'll be playing the usual 220, 230 lineups I put in. I'm going to have a lot less Breece Hall in those lineups because of the fact that you have to play a more overall picture. For just building a single entry, I think having Breece Hall is still, a fine play for a single entry, obviously, but just a player that if you're putting him in everywhere, just be mindful of the fact that everybody's going to put him in everywhere because you all love Breece Hall. Objective Jets take, they'll shit the bed in these next two games. It is certainly possible. It's a home game here, but a 3.5-point dog at home. I mean, the Chargers D does not put up a lot of resistance, so that is going to be your logic to go to Breece Hall today. But I do think you can also get different and go to a guy like Zach Wilson today. I think you can also load up on a Jets stack if you want. Obviously, for a main slate, it's never going to get there. For a showdown with Zach Wilson, priced under 9K, I think he makes some sense. But I will instead go with Garrett Wilson here and hope that having Breece and Garrett Wilson is somehow a lesser-owned version of this Jets lineup. I think you get a similar play for a guy like Allen Lazard, who is priced substantially cheaper. Obviously, Garrett Wilson, a better player, more involved in every possible way, 9.9 instead of touches per game compared to 4.1 for Allen Lazard. For a showdown slate, again, if you are playing all the tournaments, if you are playing all the lineups, I think I would look at that a little bit more. But for a single entry here, let's lean in with our best foot forward, and that is for the Jets, Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Captain, though, this is where we're going to try to get a little bit different here. We have no Josh Palmer in the mix. Austin Eckler is in a pretty okay matchup. Jets defense on the year, negative 0.09 EPA per rush, negative 0.16 EPA per running back target. So they are defending that pretty well. The weakest spot to attack on the Jets D is going to be tight ends, but we have Gerald Everett back in the mix, along with Donald Parham, along with Stone Smart, along with Trey McKitty. All those guys got snaps last week without Everett. So that is something to keep in mind here. Parham, of course, is going to be the guy that stood out the most. I don't think he's a captain play, but I'm just going to highlight him here because his salary has come up, and he probably is a little bit of a point chase if you're going to him in this spot. I might be more inclined to go to a Gerald Everett in the flex, and I'm going to do that here. 5,600, not a great price tag, but I think this tight end matchup is one where Everett should be able to maybe get to the box. I think that'd be the hope, obviously, but it gives you 4 or 5 targets at that range and also hurts Parham. I think that's a pretty okay play to go to Gerald Everett, so I'm going to go with him here. As the first part of my build, Keenan Allen captain has not paid off recently. Let's look at Keenan Allen's numbers. Incoming Johnston captain. Johnson is a play, I think, better at the flex. Obviously, you can get there at captain. No Josh Palmer in this game. That has been a big inhibitor, is Quentin Johnston not seeing the field. Of course, Quentin Johnston's own talent or lack thereof so far in a transition from TCU has not been the best for him either. So for Quentin Johnston, I think certainly a valid captain play. One to get in a 150 set, probably not going to be in my hand build. Keenan Allen, though, let's see. 14.9, 9.5, 21.5, 12.2, 48.5 was a long time ago against Minnesota. Let's go to Keenan captain. I think it's going to be a pretty tough matchup for Keenan overall, but I do think his upside is strong. Obviously, Keenan Allen, we know he hasn't the ceiling in a little bit. That makes him a little bit more appealing to me as a captain. But you can make the case. Austin Eckler, I think, also a perfectly fine captain play. Eckler seeing less work overall, is down to 20 intended touches per game, which is a pretty far cry. What it looked like he's been getting in week 1, where he's basically at 27 intended touches per game. Instead, Eckler still a high volume back and not quite as high of a volume. I do think there's a world where this matchup could benefit him, where if they just clamp down on the outside receivers, clamp down on the downfield stuff, which is something the Jets do really well. Jets on the year, negative 0.53 EPA on throws to 20-plus air yards, which is one of the toughest marks in the league. So I think there's a logic to go into Eckler, but that said, I think people are afraid of this Jets pass defense enough that playing Keenan Allen at captain will get me a little bit lower owned, and I'm willing to go there. Also, obviously can't afford Herbert in this lineup, but I don't think you have to have Herbert if you do have a pass catcher or captain. Herbert could certainly make it. We have seen the games be pretty solid. But at his price tag, if he puts up 24, if he puts up 13, you're absolutely dead. 20, you might not have to have him in the lineup. 24, getting closer. But we're not seeing a lot of those 30-point games from a guy like Justin Herbert, where if he is getting there, having that ceiling, he probably has to get a touchdown for himself in the run game. So for a guy like Justin Herbert, I think that I'm okay not having him in the flex if you have a captain who is a pass catcher. You have Eckler as well. I'm perfectly happy to not have Herbert in the lineup. And I think, obviously, again, for this build, we can't do it anyway. But just something to note right away that Herbert has a hard time making winning lineups sometimes because of his salary, and people do force him in a little bit more than his actual optimal rate is actually aligned with. Sharp to go out and fade Herbert. Jets don't allow QB ceilings. There we go. Ross knows the Jets as well as anybody. He is living and dying by this dog shit team. So kudos to him. And yeah, I think that's how I'm looking at it. So certainly would be the case for me. All right. So kicker, I think, is in play for this matchup. Who's going to move the ball and stall out? The Jets, I would think, should be able to move the ball and stall out by playing Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. We are saying that these guys are at least moving the ball, whether they get into the box or not. Hard to say, but I do think that Greg Zuerlein to me makes an okay amount of sense here. Again, the Chargers D is not very good. They've given up big days to a lot of guys. And sometimes for a bad QB, a good day could be that, hey, you just got the ball on the team's other side of the field a lot, didn't punch it in. We have seen recently some that go the other way. I think would be the best example. Steelers on Thursday night where they open up that drive, kind of doing the same thing, get that first touchdown. Then after that, we don't really see them get on their side of the field that frequently with a lot of success. That's usually how a bad offense versus a bad defense will go. I think in this case, it is a mediocre Jets offense versus a bad Chargers defense. So I think the kicker is firmly in play for me. Let's see. Good morning. Shout out to our guy, Sammy. I've ever told you that I love your fucking content. Win or lose, I love this fucking shit. Thank you, Sammy. I appreciate that. Of course, Sammy, a Squirt Squad member and one of our most beloved here, so appreciate him being in the mix. But of course, guys, hit that join button down below if you too want to get a Splash Play helmet right next to your name. Also, VIP treats like my data sheet coming out on every Saturday. And of course, I do have to get the credits here for everybody who's a member still going on the channel, but you'll be featured at the end of the video, I think, starting tomorrow. And I remember to do it and make a graphic. All right. Last player here to plunk in a salary, and then we will look at the sims, look at the optimizer, all of that. Hey, shout out Matt. I guess whenever we do have a new person joining, we have to welcome to the family. Matt Schwab, welcome to the family. Your name doesn't sound very Italian, but around here, as long as you're contributing money to the cause here of helping Splash Play put on shows every single day, you're Italian enough to join the Squirt Squad. Welcome to the family, Matt Schwab. I will never stump you, Matt. I can't stump that Schwab. There we go. That's welcome. That's what we do here. If you're new, it's why we don't get many members, because nobody actually wants to see that bit. All right, last player to plunk in here, $2,600 salary. Quentin Johnston, too cheap at $3,600. Conklin, also too cheap. These guys aren't going to fit in this build. Dalvin Cook hung on the team. Shocker to hear. Nobody wanted to trade for Dalvin Cook, given how great he's been historically. CJ Uzoma in the mix enough. Two guys I will highlight here is Ruckert, also cheap. So last week, we did see a pretty good run for both Jeremy Ruckert as well as for the other tight end, CJ Uzoma. Uzoma played 30 snaps last week. Ruckert played 27 snaps. Both guys positive EPA guys. Uzoma on the year actually has gotten a red zone target as well. So I think Uzoma is going to be the guy I go to complete this build. Again, we're saying that we're moving the ball downfield. I guess we're also making a bet against the Chargers. Eckler not making the lineup does not feel great. Ooh. All right. I think this is what we got to go with. If I could go to Eckler instead of Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, obviously a much higher floor, but we're making a bet that there is some, that's eating up all the salary. So this one will get duped. All right, fuck it. Garrett Wilson it is. This is going to be my final team, and then we'll welcome Colin to the family here. Final team for me, Keenan Allen, a captain, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Gerald Everett, Greg Zuerlein, CJ Uzoma. So we are going with a 4-2 Jets build. I presume that's not to be too highly duped. We're playing Keenan Allen, a captain without Justin Herbert. That should also cut the ownership product down. No Austin Eckler should also cut the ownership product down. We're playing a more narrow outcome, of course, because Eckler, Keenan Allen, those guys you'd expect to be the most likely to make a Chargers lineup. That said, I think this one does make a pivot point against them. We're kind of saying the Jets D has success, some success here, so maybe they're a play that you can get into this one. Their price tag, 4,200 is not that bad. I'm not going to play the Jets D, though. This is what I'm going to put in. There we go. Well, percentage skill players are actually plus EPA at this point of the season. A lot of them. I don't know percentage points. I don't track that, but there's going to be a lot of them at this point. It's all relative to, obviously, matchups that they're getting, their own individual plays. Like, it's an accumulative effect, but you see EPA numbers tend to come down over the course of a year where you have the outlier efforts early, then guys stabilize at a certain point, like Tyreek, Keenan Allen. Those guys were a 0.7 EPA guy at earlier parts of the season. Now Keenan Allen is down to like, what, 0.42. Tyreek's down to 0.55. But for what it's worth, all the guys are still ahead of where they were last year. And a lot of guys overall, the ceilings for EPA metrics this year are a lot higher than they were last year. We'll see how that changes in the back half of the season. Obviously, guys getting banged up, guys getting figured out by opposing defenses can change that. But for right now, to me, the EPA metrics guys are producing more than average. But it does seem like defenses are giving up less favorable matchups across the board, at least from what I'm seeing. Best of the business, Spags. Hope you and the family are well. Shout out Matt. Appreciate that one here. And I got to welcome Colin here. Colin, every Italian needs a good Irish guy to take the fall or give advice. That's the storied history going back to the Godfather days. You could be my Tom, of course. I forget Tom's last name. Tom Hagen, of course. Tom Hagen, a great consigliere to the family, of course, and the Godfather. But welcome to the family, Colin. Appreciate you guys. Glad to get some people in the mix here on a fine Monday, on a sleepy Spags Monday. All right. Projections. Let's look at them now, guys. On Stochastic. Just join so I can see Spags do that bit again. Not for the content so much. Thank you, Colin. I appreciate it. Top projected players according to Stochastic. As you can see, they updated last night, and I don't believe I've updated yet. Okay, good. So no updates. We do have the Fantasy Cruncher and the Sims already occupied and filled, so that'll be good for us. We won't have to waste time doing that on stream. Top projected players according to Stochastic: Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert. These guys are the highest priced guys in the slate. They should be highly projected. Austin Eckler probably to come up a little bit less because he's even higher priced with a less good projection. So I'd expect that the optimizer is going to put us on Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert a little bit more. Breece Hall, 10-4 salary. Again, he'll be the jet that comes in a lot. He'll be the jet in 5-1 builds. He'll be the jet in 4-2 builds. He'll be the jet. It's in every build. I think Breece Hall is going to be very hard to avoid in builds on the slate. And Garrett Wilson, not too far behind Breece Hall, but a similar projection on these guys. So right away, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, your optimal plays are going to come up probably quite a bit. Zach Wilson coming up right behind these guys as well. And Quentin Johnston, probably one of the better values who we'll see in a moment here. Top values on the slate, Darius Davis. So he'd be the guy that probably pops into some lineups, maybe can do something in the game, but you're not going to expect him to have the greatest results. Probably going to be a guy that I would fade for the most part. Played 9 snaps last week on the year, 7.7 snaps per game. Darius Davis not getting red zone work. Certainly can break a big play, but is not the kind of guy I would normally try to target on a slate if you get a lot of them. Randall Cobb comes in at number 2, $200 salary. Cobb is also down in snaps, I believe. Yeah, Cobb didn't even play any snaps last week, 28.8 on the year. So Randall Cobb, a non-factor who theoretically I presume will be expected to get some more snaps today, but probably not a good play. Michael Carter, CJ Uzomah, who I do think, again, put him in the lineup. He's probably a solid play. Xavier Gibson, nobody here too exciting in the $200 tier, but you're probably going to get some of these guys in an optimizer build. Fehoko over Davis. I wouldn't go to Fehoko this week because I think Fehoko got there because of the fact that the tight ends were not available because Gerald Everett wasn't in, and I didn't want to target Stone Smart at all. But Fehoko, if you were to go his way, I mean, he should get an increase in snaps, you would think. $600 salary. Yeah, no, he's definitely a live pivot to the $200 guys because he has a worse projection, higher salary. Fehoko in play as kind of a pivot point to all the cheap guys that will come up naturally. Darius Davis feels okay. Yeah, I mean, I just wouldn't favor him over anybody else. Again, it's just such a low workload, under 10 snaps a game. Like any of those guys, I'm okay getting as like a part of a portfolio, but I think if they come up a lot, like you shouldn't be playing them a lot just because of the fact that like the role's not fantastic. There's enough guys that can take snaps away. Though Darius Davis should theoretically see an increase in targets just because, again, no Josh Palmer does free up something for somebody. The assumption is that'll go to Quentin Johnston's way, but it likely can also lead to bumps for guys like Darius Davis, guys like Fehoko, guys like who else would be a Chargers receiver? Davis, Johnston. And nobody else getting a projection besides those guys. Keelan Doss, if he's active, could get a projection. I don't know. All right, ownership. Let's look at that. Of course, the ownership data from Stochastic, both data points from Stochastic, very important ones because this is how a lot of the field is either playing straight up off these projections or also they combine them and, do an average like I do with ETR's data. So that is something to keep in mind for yourself. Keenan Allen, top projected owned player, 62.5 overall, 14.6 in the captain spot. Austin Eckler, number 2, 55.6, 13.4 in the captain spot. Justin Herbert, 53.6, 9.3 in the captain spot. Breece Hall, 50%. I think that is low. Again, look at the thumbnail. 50% projected ownership, 10% in the captain spot. And Garrett Wilson, 49% owned, 11% in the captain spot. If I had to guess how this moves around, I think Breece Hall ends up the highest owned captain. If I had to guess, and this has been happening every slate where same thing last night, again, Jamar Chase, I think, had a 12% ownership projection on him, ended up closer to 20% in the big tournaments. I would guess that Breece Hall is closer to 20%. I think based on all these guys, again, the public love of Breece Hall. Again, I know you guys just heard me going on a rant and all that about Breece Hall, but it's more about like what Breece Hall means to the ecosystem. And if people see him being under-owned, they're going to go like, fuck, got to double the field on him. And I think he gets to 20-25%. Come back in victory lap if I'm wrong about it. But I think that'd be my guess here, is that he's going to be much lower owned in this ownership projection than he actually is going to be when it comes to the field. Just surrendered 8 passing TDs, yards. You want year to date, 5 to the tight end position. Do we factor this into building lineups? I wouldn't necessarily factor in DVP stuff. Obviously, I do to a certain extent with the expected points added metric, but just targeting touchdowns, like you have to then worry about who is the guys getting targets in those matchups. Is it dog shit guys? Is it the Travis Kelce's of the world? Obviously, one of those games was a Travis Kelce game. So in that spot, like I wouldn't necessarily evaluate it, but I do think, again, the Jets, to me, are a defense, excuse me, that is live to target against tight ends because of the fact they give up a higher expected points added metric. So 0.24 EPA to tight ends is their weakest spot in a defense. And that was actually something that we saw in some of the games yesterday where I'm trying to think who's the best example of it. There was one player who I'm blanking on. Unfortunately, don't have the data from yesterday. And basically, it was like negative EPA to the slot, negative EPA out wide, negative EPA to running backs. The only positive EPA was the tight ends. It actually might have been Dalton Schultz. And obviously, the other guys got there, but Dalton Schultz had the real outlier day in a way he normally doesn't have. So that's where I do try to think that, the weaknesses align a little bit more with the EPA metrics than just straight, this defense gave up 5 touchdowns kind of thing. But certainly tight end is a weak spot for the Jets because they defend a lot better out wide, defend a lot better against running backs. So that does have the logic there. That you would have a better game for tight ends overall. Low-owned guys you can get to in a showdown. Uzoma under 10%. We put him in, so I think that feels pretty good for the single entry. Josh Kelly under 15. Cobb under 10. Carter under 10. Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, direct leverage against a guy like Breece Hall, but Dalvin snaps, I think, were down to like nothing last week. Dalvin played 8 snaps last week compared to 41 for Breece Hall. Michael Carter played 15 snaps last week compared to, again, the 41 for Breece Hall. So relative to the low-owned guys, Dalvin Cook, nobody's going to play because of the price tag as well. But it does seem like Michael Carter, $200, more likely to get work, more likely to get those third and long kind of plays that the Jets can find themselves in. So I think for Michael Carter, I'd probably play him over Dalvin here. Daniel Jones, torn ACL out for the year. Add him to the loved and lost, even though I don't think anybody has loved Daniel Jones at any point this year. Giants, certainly a team that would benefit from tanking right now, but of course they didn't trade Saquon, because why would you? You can roster Guyton on FanDuel, not in the DK pool. Maybe they add him 5K on FanDuel. Yeah, Guyton, I don't know. Guyton's the kind of guy that I certainly wouldn't have a lot of love for. Also, I guess a chance that he might not be active. So I would watch out for that as well. Guyton has not played this year from what I'm seeing, so obviously, historically, has been a guy that can get downfield and make a big play, but certainly someone that I don't expect that to be the case necessarily, but certainly you can go there. All right. The optimized lineups, of course, and what the point of the optimizer is not going to tell you exactly what the field's going to play, but it is going to tell you what the projections are going to push people towards a little bit more. So when you end up with guys like we talked about on Thursday night, where if you have guys like Kenny Pickett, Deontay Johnson that are getting in every lineup based on projections, they're just going to end up in every lineup together a little more naturally. So that's something that I always observe when trying to do my showdown builds. In this particular slate, let's see, anybody at 100%? Zach Wilson is in 96% of lineups, but not all of them. Keenan Allen makes it in every single lineup, 60% at flex, 40% at captain. So Keenan Allen will be everywhere. He also is the chalk captain according to the projections. So I did not do myself any favors that one. Let's see. Garrett Wilson, 60%. Garrett Wilson, not in every lineup. Quentin Johnston, 60% at flex, 20% at captain. So he's not in every lineup. So it is just Keenan Allen who makes it in every lineup. So you don't necessarily have to do a play max one of Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert thing. It does seem like it is a just Keenan Allen slate. Herbert coming up at 52% of lineups at the flex, not coming up at all at captain, which is kind of interesting for a guy like Herbert, who theoretically can get there by running in for 1 touchdown, maybe creating pass game touchdowns for guys like Allen, guys like Everett, guys like Eckler, guys like Parham, Quentin Johnston. You can do some unique things, I think, with Keenan Allen at captain, or excuse me, with Justin Herbert at captain. So that is probably a little bit under-owned, I would think, because I just don't, people aren't flocking to play QBs at captain quite as much. And maybe after, I think Joe Burrow won at captain last night, so maybe that changes the equation a little bit here, but that's definitely a way to get a little bit more unique. Big Lenny. I checked my best ball exposures and showing 0% Stroud. How do I fix that? Well, you probably could have fixed it, Lenny, by drafting a little bit less Christian McCaffrey. That's just the natural flow of things. You would have gotten no. Unfortunately, Stroud to me, Stroud is actually pretty well represented in my best ball portfolio, but he is not a guy that I have stacked up with the guys that went off yesterday, where I had a hard time getting Schultz with Stroud for whatever reason. I do have a lot of tanks, so that helped me out a little bit. But Stroud, look, people bet against rookie QBs, rookie tight ends. You know, one channel that never fucking bet against rookie QBs and rookie tight ends is here on Splash Play. So, you know how to follow. Top projected lineup here. If you want to play for cash games, this would be one that you could play. Keenan Allen, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Zach Wilson, Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis. This is probably, what the chalk kind of lineup is, using all the salary, cramming in guys who are value plays. Quentin Johnson, again, makes it in here. Quentin Johnson, pretty well represented. 80% of lineups for a guy like QJ, who's not done much this year. He's a player that if you don't like him and you want to go to everybody else, he probably is going to decrease your ownership product quite a bit, because I do think QJ is a good play, but a very well projected play at a cheap salary. Nothing else to note here besides the team stacks. So we're getting 1-5-1 Charger stack out of 25 lineups. So that is not something we're actually going to force people on quite as much. We are getting 9 out of 25 4-2s favoring the Chargers. We're also getting some Jets 4-2s as well. So nothing stands out as that crazy here. A lot of 3-3 builds. 3-3 is always kind of the mid, kind of the middling kind of approach that you're going to if you go to a 3-3. So I would favor the 4-2s a little bit more, and 5-1 certainly are going to be in play here. Which kicker is showing up more? Cameron Dicker showing up, but not that much. Only 3 out of 25 lineups with Cameron Dicker. Defenses, Chargers showing up a little bit. No Jets D. I do think that playing the Chargers disappointment build is kind of interesting, where you play Jets D, Greg Zuerlein, somebody from the Chargers to put up most of the yardage and touchdown production. But the Chargers are a team that have been known to disappoint at times. And, the Jets are still a good defense, even though they haven't been quite as good as last year. So just not seeing the Jets D come up naturally, not seeing Greg Zuerlein come up naturally. I think it's kind of an interesting approach to go to like a 4-2 Jets build that just kind of focuses more so on the Chargers failing. Dicker the kicker. Dicker the kicker is the only one showing up here. All right, the Sims. Let's see what the Sims have to say here. Again, Randy's before the show to try to shorten things up. And, of course, my Breece Hall rant took up too much time. Top Sim lineup, again, the ROIs are on the left part of the screen here. Keenan Allen, Cameron Dicker, Chargers, Garrett Wilson, Jets, Zach Wilson. It's the highest ROI lineup, guys. Does fade Breece Hall. Something to note here. Actually, Breece also not in the second one. Quentin Johnson, a captain. Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Xavier Gibson, Zach Wilson. Oof. That feels pretty thin to expect Zach Wilson to get there and only Xavier Gibson to produce enough yardage to make a lineup. Gibson, I think, does return kicks, so I guess he could get there a couple ways, but that's not a lineup I think I'd actually want to build at 49.8. Overall exposures, though, let's look at these. Top exposure guy would be Justin Herbert in the flex. Zach Wilson, number 2 in the flex. Quentin Johnson, number 3. Cameron Dicker, number 4. Keenan Allen, number 5. All these guys, of course, being the flex plays, these would be the highest exposures that the Sims are recommending. Top captain plays, Keenan Allen coming 35% in captain. So it does seem like even though he's the chalk captain, the Sim does expect you or does want you to get more of Keenan Allen there. Same thing for Garrett Wilson, with the field on Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall. Breece Hall, not a high simulated ROI at captain. And yet, despite that, I still think even if people see this, they're going to go, these fucking Sims don't know. And I think they're going to go to Breece Hall. So, do what you will with this information, guys. Like, ultimately, I can only tell you what I'm seeing based off the data and what I think of the game theory stuff. But when Breece Hall is coming up as really negative ROI at captain, negative 27% ROI, it's just at a certain point, you don't break a 50-yard touchdown. That's all I'm going to say to kind of sum up the rant I went on earlier. And also, like, the public's love of a guy does sometimes force them into a guy a little bit more, even when they just kind of go la, 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 and ignore the fact that it's like big plays are adding value. Volume is king for anything with running backs. As we saw yesterday, Josh Jacobs didn't look rejuvenated or anything. He just got 2 touchdowns and got the usage that he needed to have an outlier day. For a guy like Breece Hall, I just worry about that. Any route for Josh Kelly without an Eckler injury? I mean, Kelly's still playing snaps. He played 15 last week, so it's not a lot. He can definitely make a winning lineup as a flex. I don't think he can make it as a captain, but he can make it as a flex. Anybody can make it as a flex. Like, I think Drew Sample, I don't believe, made the winning lineup last night, but he probably would have if he had a little bit more ownership and maybe one more catch. So for Drew Sample, I think he's like the best case that, like, a guy who's done nothing on the year can make a winning lineup if he's just playing snaps and out there. Sims go more like a Keenan Allen. Keenan is matchup proof from data. Jets have given up the fewest DK points per game to wide receiver for what it's worth. I mean, I don't like fewest DK points per receiver. I kind of don't care about that much because again, it comes down to the matchups and all that. A guy like Keenan Allen is a good route runner. Is not the same as like a George Pickens, who's more of a go up and get it kind of guy. So like those are things that I think that kind of thing wouldn't necessarily reflect quite as much. But Keenan Allen being the number one receiver, being the guy who gets the most routes, the guy who gets the most targets, like that's what I would look at more so. So I wouldn't have any issue playing Keenan Allen tonight. And if anything, I think the fact that Keenan Allen hasn't shown up in the box scores the last few weeks in like a huge way, I think make him a more interesting play tonight, especially if the data's pushing you there. But your logic and people's logic, I think, are going to say, Keenan Allen against this Jets team, like if the data says a play is good, but then there's a human reason why you wouldn't play the guy, I tend to think that's a reason to lean into the data more. Other lineups we can look at here that might be interesting. Let's see if there's interesting captains to go to. Let's look at a Breece Hall captain for you guys. I'll give you guys what you want. Again, you guys want Breece? See what the highest ROI Breece lineup at captain is. Breece Hall, Austin Eckler, Cameron Dicker, Greg Zuerlein, Jets, Zach Wilson. So a more defensive-minded matchup where the Chargers are not putting up big points. I think that makes sense as to how that would be a lineup that Breece can get there. Of course, the salary in this one's pretty big at 49.6, so would be less inclined to play this one. A captain Breece lineup I'd be more inclined to play. Conklin? I don't know about Conklin. Conklin is at 44 snaps last game. All right. Conklin not as far ahead of the other tight ends as it might seem, though. Conklin 44 snaps last game. Uzoma 30. Rucker 27. So just something to keep in mind there that I think Conklin's going to project the best, but I don't think he's like a runaway player, especially at the salary difference compared to those other guys. So like I would play Conklin, Uzoma, Rucker as pretty flat. Conklin's the best of the three, but relative to Bills, like if you have a good Conklin lineup that's like using 50K in salary, 49.8 in salary, just drop from Conklin to Uzoma or to Rucker, and that's one way to get different right away. Breece Hall, nothing else stands out too much at Breece Hall. Let's look at one fun one. Let's see. What would it take for Zach Wilson to get their captain? Zach Wilson, Lazard, Breece Hall, Jets D, Keenan Allen, Tyler Conklin. So we are seeing a 5-1 Jets build here. That is definitely unique. High ROI on this one as well at a 47.6 salary. So this is the kind of lineup that if you really want to fade the Chargers and just go with, again, a 5-1 build with the opposing team's top receiver, that is a build that's going to be pretty low owned. And I think will hold up as being an okay play. Of course, filming this one at 11:45 a.m. on the East Coast, so things move around throughout the course of a day. That said, I think this one will still be valid by the time nighttime rolls around. Conklin has more catches than Lazard, some targets this season, 2,200 less. Again, for showdowns, I wouldn't worry about that because like what that basically, that logic that Steve is kind of rolling out, which is the way that you should think about most slates, like for a showdown that just puts you on the chalkiest plays for the most part. So like when you nickel and dime guys value, like in a positive way, it's going to reflect well on them. That's when you end up with chalkier builds with guys like Conklin. Whereas like for a showdown, you just want the unique combos. So to me, I see Conklin and I go, all right, he's really not getting that many more routes than the other tight ends. Obviously, he's a better play than those tight ends. But for a single game sample size, you want to be able to lean in on the other stuff. So yes, Conklin is a good play. It might be a better play than a guy like Lazard. And I think the projections also back that out. Stochastic has a projection of 7.8 for Lazard, 7.2 for Conklin. So they're not that far off. Conklin will come up more in an optimizer because he is cheaper and has a similar projection point. So that just makes a guy like Lazard more appealing, as well as a guy like, again, like Rucker, like Uzoma. That's how I think about showdowns, but obviously, Steven's a smart guy. You can do whatever he wants. But I think that's sort of how I try to view it, is like, it's not about the best plays for a showdown. It's about the guys that are allowing you to get unique combos more than anything, because that's how you actually win the prizes and have it duped by 5 people instead of 50 people. Anybody else to note here? I did mention Justin Herbert as a captain being potentially a little bit lower owned than he should be. Herbert, Breece Hall, Gerald Everett, Quentin Johnston, Conklin, Zach Wilson. Kind of like this build. I do think this one with no Keenan Allen certainly is a way to get a little more different. Obviously, if somebody is playing Justin Herbert at captain, they're likely to put in Keenan Allen because the assumption is that Keenan Allen having a big day will help drive Herbert to a big day. But in reality, Herbert has a bigger day if Keenan Allen doesn't beat him out as captain. So that's something where I think that has a good amount of logic to it. And I believe that was, again, what won the showdown last night. I didn't look at the final lineups, but I believe it was Burrow without Chase that made it. It was like Burrow, Higgins, Irv Smith, Mixon. So basically they loaded up on the Bengals, but didn't put in the top Bengal. Like that's, if you are going to play a QB captain, that is the way to do that. All right. Periodically smart, and I don't mention that in a vacuum. You can get weird elsewhere. I agree you can get weird elsewhere, but like, okay, let's look up for the sake of our guy Steve. Let's look up contains Conklin. And I would bet because of Conklin's salary, so the highest ROI lineups are one that leave a lot of salary on the table. So if you're playing a guy like Conklin, like he's a guy that's going to fit well for a lot of people, and they're going to put him in at a 49.9 salary, a 49.8 salary, which is the kind of spot you don't want to play Conklin because if anything, you want to leave a lot of salary on the table. And I still think you might want to leave even more salary on the table and go to Uzoma, go to Rucker. Not that, again, not that those guys are like great plays. They're just not dissimilar enough of a play from a guy like Conklin. But if you are playing a Conklin lineup, like these are the ones you should be playing under 49.5 at least. I would say probably under 48.9999 would be what I would do. This one I would not play. Like 49.8 with Conklin, Dicker, Jets, Keenan Allen, captain, Herbert. Like this is the kind of chalky build that's still fading Breece Hall, so it's getting less chalky. Still fading Garrett Wilson, so it's less chalky. But because of the fact that you have a lot of unifying themes here and a salary that's not far off 50K, this one is going to be duped a lot more than one dupe for sure. All right, my 3 takeaways here. Let's do that, and we'll close out this video. 3 takeaways to get unique on this build. Number 1 would be play less Breece Hall. I have to say it again. I put him in the single entry, so I do think for a single entry, he's still a fine play. Still going to play, close to half my lineups with Breece Hall, but I really do feel like Breece Hall 10% ownership I think is light. 50% ownership in the flex I think is light. I think we see closer to 20, 70 for those 2 spots respectively. So for me, Breece Hall, great player. Great. What he's overcome to do what he's been doing is tremendous. The fact that he keeps getting there in adverse conditions by breaking long plays is a true testament to his ability. So there we go. We have now adequately labored and gargled the balls of Breece Hall adequately for you guys out there. But that said, it's a showdown slate. It's not about just playing the best players. It's about getting unique constructs, getting unique things around that. So if you're playing Breece, make sure to get unique. But I think overall, just don't go into the ownership and expect him to be what the ownership projections were saying because people just love Breece too much. As we saw in the chat earlier with a sharp community here. Imagine a less sharp community and how they'd respond to that. See, how dare you? How dare you? Number 2, it's a way to get unique on the slate. Key takeaway for me would be, I think playing more Jets D. That is one way that the Chargers fails. The Jets D getting pressure, breaking things up a little bit. Jets defense on the year getting a 30% pressure rate and just an 18% blitz rate. So they're generating a lot of pressure with the front 4, front 5, depending on what they're putting out there, mostly the front 4. That is something to me that I do think can lead to some positive situations for them. Obviously does lead to some potential risks as well, because Justin Herbert, not a bad guy under pressure. Negative 0.45 EPA is perfectly okay. But still Herbert, any QB getting pressure is going to be slightly worse or substantially worse than the regular version themselves. So the Jets getting pressure at a high rate, I think it makes some sense to go there and try to target a Jets takeaway. Jets pick 6, a lot of potential outs there. Number 3 takeaway, I think Greg Zuerlein's a good play. I imagine the Jets are going to be able to move the ball today, but I think the Jets are still going to struggle in the red zone as they have in the past. And also, kicker is a great way to get leverage on guys like Breece Hall, guys like Garrett Wilson. It is still a positive matchup in the red zone going against the Chargers D. Chargers D on the year, positive 0.01 EPA per red zone rush, 0.04 EPA per red zone pass. But this is Zach Wilson who's controlling things for this offense. So I think playing a little more kicker, playing a little more Jets defense, I guess really Jets D and kicker would be 2 things that I would play more that I just don't think people are going to play a lot of today. have we talked about Breece Hall yet? Suppose not. Thank you for the tough love. That's all I could do. I appreciate you guys being here. Of course, yes, at a full rant. That's all I could ever provide here. But of course, follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod. If you are new around here, please make sure to subscribe down below. We do the showdown breakdowns where I'm not afraid to be wrong here. I'm just trying to give you guys the data as I see it, the game theory as I see it. And if Breece Hall puts it down on me today, don't come back tomorrow and go, oh, fucking Breece Hall, told you, man. Especially if he does it with a 70-yard touchdown. I don't want to hear that. But I do think this is what we do here on Splash Play. I'm not afraid to be wrong, and hopefully you guys won't be either, because it's a showdown. You got to be willing to be wrong. But subscribe down below, hit the like button, leave a comment. Splash Play perpetually on the march to 3K subs. We are on track to hit it before, definitely before the new year. So please, for the love of God, please subscribe down below. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod, and come back tomorrow. Of course, Tuesdays will be our best ball review show. Are things looking better in Underdog for me? We'll find out. Spoiler alert, they are looking slightly better. Thank God. DraftKings, though, we'll find out tomorrow. But I will see you guys then. Of course, if I don't take this down tonight, I hope that you do. So I will see you then. Enjoy your days, and of course, good luck. Bye.